Hello everybody and welcome back to another Farming Simulator 22 how-to video. Today we're going to talk about all things sorghum. But before that, this video is brought to you by Douglas, KBO SDQ. Thank you for being a farm baron. So sorghum is a new crop coming to Farming Simulator franchise in Farming Simulator 22. It is a crop that is used around the world for animal feed and human consumption alike. And today we're going to take a look at all the steps involved in growing, harvesting, and what can you use sorghum for in base game Farming Simulator 22. So here we are on Elm Creek, and I have already prepared field 57 here. It is now cultivated, fully fertilized, limed, and ready to go. So the first thing we're going to need to do is obviously put the seed in the ground. So for this video, I'm going to be using the Kloss Oxeon 960 and the big Amazon 1501-C seeder, but really you can use any tractor and seeder combination from the shop. So if we go to tools, seeders, you're going to see all of the seeders are going to have sorghum listed as a crop type that it will put into the ground. And just for brevity's sake, we're using the biggest base game seeder we have available. Now, as far as seed goes, you have several options. You can buy a big bag pallet of seed, $900 for 1,000 liters of seed. You can buy a big bag of seed. It's a little bit more economical. $800 for 1,000 liters of seed. Or you could buy a pallet of seed bags. That is $950 for 1,050 liters of seed. Now, I will say that this is not a big pallet of individual bags. This is just a pallet of visual bags, but you would still fill it the same way you would fill with the big bag or the big bag pallet. That is, you would come up alongside the big bags or big pallet, and you would hit R once you opened the seeder. With the N button, you'd hit R to fill it. Or if you used a front loader, telehandler, or some other lifting apparatus, you could place the big bag pallet or big bag pallet over top of the seed hopper right here, and then it would empty into the seeder. Let's go ahead and just get to the action of seeding itself. In a seeder, you're going to change the crop to the desired crop type. We have sorghum already selected down here, but if you should happen to need to change that, you go on PC and use Y to cycle to the sorghum crop icon. We're going to turn our seeder on, and off we go, putting sorghum down into the ground. While he is working, let's go ahead and talk about some things that we have pre-staged over here. There's been some questions about sorghum and if you can mow it. So I've got a mower here. Got a trailer to catch our crop later on. There's been some questions and interest as to if we can use a forage harvester on our sorghum, so we're going to try it. We have two different forage harvester headers. We have a kind of a mowing header, and then we have the traditional header that is used on crops like corn. We're going to try both of those. We have the large Ideal 10T harvester with grain header. We're going to use that to harvest some of our crop. And then when we are done, we have the Dalbo Maxi Cut mulcher that we're going to use to mulch what is left after harvest into the ground and basically then start the preparations for the next crop. Now, what can you use sorghum for? Well, you can sell sorghum at various sell points. We'll get to that here in a little bit. You can purchase or place a grain mill, depending on if your map has a grain mill already placed or not. And the grain mill will allow you to make flour with your sorghum. So you can take 150 units of sorghum and it will produce 158 units of flour, and it will do that cycle 5 times per hour at a cost of $1 per hour. Now, if you have animals, there are some animals that will also make use of sorghum. Those are horses, pigs, and chickens. Now, we're going to demonstrate feeding all 3 of these sorghum here in a bit. So let's go ahead and fast forward time and see what sorghum looks like once it's come up out of the ground. If you are playing with the seasonal growth calendar turned on, let's go ahead and take a look and see what that schedule looks like. You're going to be able to seed sorghum in April and May, and sorghum should be ready to harvest in August or September. And now with the seasonal growth calendar turned off, you're going to expect after 1 month post seeding, your sorghum is going to look like this. It's going to be in its first stage of growth. Now, 2 months post seeding, we have another growth stage. And at this point, you might be inquiring, well, I wonder if we can mow it now. Because I know that, at least here in the States, there are a fair number of farmers that will grow sorghum and they will cut it at an earlier growth stage for the purpose of basically making hay. Let's see what happens. So we are not able to cut sorghum. Period. Basically, at any time, sorghum is not able to be cut with a mower. So we can cut it, can't cut it now, we can't cut it in the next growth state, we can't cut it when it is ready to harvest. It is, in essence, an unmowable crop. Now, how about the forage harvester? At this point, the forage harvester is also not able to do anything. So let's go ahead and move ahead 1 more month. See what the crop looks like. 3 months post seeding, we now have sorghum in its final growth state. Once again, I just want to demonstrate that sadly mowing is not an option. I know for many that is a bit of a disappointment, but that is how sorghum is currently set up in Farming Simulator 22. Now, as far as the forage harvester goes, at this point, you can indeed use both the mowing header, well, at least the mowing header, on your crop. You can see we are harvesting the sorghum, and we are basically producing chaff at this point. And what can we do with the chaff? Well, we can do pretty much what we can do with chaff in any format, and that is put it into a silage bunker for the purpose of making silage. Now, I was really surprised that we can use this header on our sorghum. That is indeed also possible at this point in time. This is, again, the final growth state. And what we get is, as you can see, chaff. Now let's move forward one more month. And we're going to see this in a ready to harvest state. Very interesting in both the mowing header for the forage harvester and the traditional maize header for the forage harvester. We leave a fair bit of plant in the ground. So we're now 4 months post seeding. We have ready to harvest sorghum. So if you are playing without the seasonal calendar, 4 months need to go by in order for you to have harvestable sorghum. Just one final time, we're going to demonstrate that mowing does not work. And we can use our 2 headers on our forage harvester to harvest the sorghum as chaff. As you can see there. Although I have to say, in my opinion, that feels like a fairly inefficient way of doing things. Doesn't seem like the yield is going to be all that significant. And the fact is that you're going to have to dump the chaff into a silage bunker, compact it, cover it, and then let it basically cook until it is silage to be able to make use of it. There are far more efficient crops to be growing for chaff. But if you want to, it is indeed possible. But the more traditional way of harvesting sorghum is going to be with a grain harvester in a grain header. So let me just show you these forage harvesters because we didn't really show those. So under tools, we have forage harvester headers. I was using the Direct Disc 500. You see it does have the sorghum icon. There are several other kind of mower type headers here for various brands of harvesters. And then we have the kind of the maize type header. And you can see it is also listed as working with sorghum. And we have several different sizes of those headers across various brands of forage harvesters. Then the forage harvesters themselves are up here under vehicles. Forage harvesters, we were using the class Jaguar. Now, as far as more traditional harvesters, they're going to be here under vehicles and then harvesters. All of these are going to be capable of harvesting sorghum with the correct header. And you're going to get the correct header here under tools and then headers. And then all of these headers are going to work with the exception of this one here, which is for sunflowers only, as well as this one right here, which is also for sunflowers only. Now, specific to this particular presentation, we are using the Power Flow Vent, which is a 12-meter wide header. And we are using the Ideal Harvester here in the 10 XP variant with the ideal drive cab. So let's go ahead and get set up for that and show you what harvesting sorghum with a grain harvester looks like. So just in case this is the first time that you have used a harvester, you're going to need to unfold it with X. The grain header is going to attach to the front. I'm just going to drive up to the front like this and attach it. I'm going to turn it on. And drive into our crop. So here we have the sorghum going into the grain header. You can see on this particular crop, a fair bit of the plant is being left. And that is because that is how most often sorghum is harvested with a grain header. Is you're only taking off the top part of the plant. So we are leaving a fair bit of mulching material on the ground. Sorghum does not allow you to leave a windrow, so we will not be able to use sorghum as a straw bearing crop. And here we can see sorghum going into the grain hopper. I have to say the ideal with the ideal drive really does give a nice open cab because you don't have that steering column kind of taking up your perspective here in the front. Here's a really cool angle on how high the header is off the ground with respect to the sorghum harvesting. Pretty much any other grain crop, that header is going to be much lower to the ground. Now once you have harvested your crop, you're going to want to store it somewhere. So we can store our harvested sorghum in many of the included silos in the base game. Here I have one of those placed right here. And depending on the silo, the dump point and the fill point is going to be in various locations. Let's go ahead and take a look at these in the build mode. So if we go to silos, I have this one right here is the one I put down. But there are also some variants that are a little bit bigger in size. We have single grain bins that require an auger to fill. I have a separate how-to video on how to use those. And then we have these larger ones that have separate dump and fill areas. So those are those. Silo extensions you would place next to the silo, and it's simply going to add additional capacity. And once you have added grain into your silo, if you go to the prices screen, you're going to see how much we have in storage. You're also going to see where we can take these to sell them. Now we happen to have 2 grain mills simply because there is a grain mill on this map already, and I placed a grain mill here for demonstration purposes. But pretty straightforward. If you want to sell grain, you're just going to take grain out of your silo by hitting R, selecting the grain you want to draw out, fill your trailer, and then drive to the location and dump it. Pretty straightforward. Now let's talk about production. So in Farming Simulator 22, they introduced production into the game, and you can take sorghum to a grain mill, be it a grain mill that is already on the map or a grain mill that you place on the map, and you can unload sorghum into the mill like this. We're just going to add a little bit. And then we're going to want to make sure that we can turn it on. We need to turn on the production. There's a couple different ways to do that. We can come up here to the wrench, hit R. We're going to come down here to sorghum flour. You see we have 2,985 liters of sorghum stored. What we can do is we can come down here and we can hit activate to turn that on. We now have this blue dot saying that production has been turned on. And over time, we will get sorghum flour to be produced. Right now, we are storing sorghum flour. We can also click on that and hit enter on PC to change that to selling or distributing. If we change it to selling, the factory will auto sell at the top of every hour the product. You will not necessarily get the best price when you do that, but it is an option that is available. When you set it to distribution, the grain mill will send flour down line to the next production facility if you own it. Okay? If you don't own it, distribution isn't going to do anything. We have it set to storing, so we should see pallets of flour appear right here once we have 1,000 liters or a fair amount of product already produced. Now, let's talk about animal uses for sorghum. So we come here to our animal menu. We have horses. Horses take a base food, which is either oats or sorghum, as ideally 60% of their diet, and hay at 40% of their diet. If you feed them both, they will be 100% effective. If you feed them one or the other, then in essence, they will be a little less productive than normal. Chickens only accept one type of food, grain, and they accept wheat, barley, or sorghum. And then pigs. Pigs accept 4 different types of food. They accept corn or sorghum as their base food, which should make up approximately 50% of their food. Wheat and barley for 25%, which is grain. Their protein, which is going to be soybeans, canola, or sunflowers, at 20%, and potatoes or sugar beets at 5%. Now, we've already done how-to videos on all of the animals individually, so we're not going to go into a whole lot of details about each animal and its particular animal pens. I just wanted to demonstrate that we can feed sorghum to our horses. Like that. We can feed sorghum to our pigs individually, just like this. And we can feed sorghum to our chickens, just like that. Now you may say, well, what about cows? Because at XYZ farm, I know they feed sorghum to their cows. At this point in time, Farming Simulator 22 does not have sorghum being used by cattle. We take a look at the animals. Cows, you can see they accept grass, hay, or total mixed rations. And the total mixed rations recipe does not involve sorghum. Now, if you use a forage harvester, like we have demonstrated on your sorghum field, then you will get chaff. You can take chaff, put it in a silage bunker, and produce silage and you can use silage in your total mixed rations recipe, but you do not feed sorghum directly to cattle. Now I'm going to speed up time a little bit, and we'll let the grain mill do what the grain mill does, and that is produce flour. And we should see a pallet spawn here in a little bit. So there we have our first pallet of flour. We have 1,900 liters of sorghum left, and it's just going to continue to run and produce more pallets of flour. At that point, we have the ability to take our flour and sell it. Come down here to flour. We can take flour to the bakery, fast food restaurant, grocery mart, or Johnson's Farmers Market and sell it as a finished good. If we own the bakery, we can take the flour down to it, either via distribution or manually, and at that point, use it to make bread or cakes. Now, the only thing left to do with respect to our sorghum is to mulch the remaining plant matter down into the ground so that we can then prepare this field for our next planting. And then at this point, we're going to do our regimen for preparing the field, be that plowing, cultivating, power harrowing, shallow cultivation, disc harrowing, to get our field ready for the next harvest, or the next planting, I should say. We can put sorghum back in here, and then 4 months later, here we are again at the next step of the process. So guys, I hope that was useful and helpful. If you got any questions, let me know. If you have any comments on sorghum, let me know. If there's anything I missed, I don't think so, but if there's anything I missed, let me know down in the comments below. We're going to be continuing this little series of how-to videos related to all of the crops available to us in Farm Sim 22. We've already done videos related to grapes, olives, sorghum, poplar, and oilseed radish. So until next time, happy farming.